thank you for joining for the virtual program Understanding the ICE Out Legislation Package from Those Who Know It Best. You can watch our previous programs on HIAS Pennsylvania's YouTube page and on our website, www.hiaspa.org. My name is Catherine Miller Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania, a nonprofit whose mission is to provide immigration legal services to low-income immigrants and refugees in Pennsylvania. It's of course well known at this point that Immigration Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, is a federal law enforcement force that seems to have little training in de-escalation or, more importantly, the Constitution. From mask wearing to unmarked vehicles to warrantless arrests, racial profiling, and violent encounters, the nation has watched in horror as this lawless enforcement force has run rampant across our communities. As a result of the lawlessness, communities across the nation have fought back by passing legislation to limit ICE's power and demand that certain minimum standards are withheld and upheld. Philadelphia, I'm proud to say, because of our guests' work, has recently joined the ranks of these other jurisdictions by passing a series of bills that are collectively known as ICE Out legislation. So today's program will focus on this legislation. What does it say? What does it do? And how does it make our community safer? City Councilpersons Landau and Brooks join us today to answer these critical questions. Both councilpersons were instrumental in crafting the legislation and ensuring its passage. Both have a long and proud history of fighting for vulnerable communities in Philadelphia. We are so honored to have them as our guests on this program. If you have any questions during the discussion, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. To open the Q&A, click on the More option at the bottom of your screen, and it should open a menu with Q&A as one of the options. We receive a lot of questions during our webinar, so we'll get to as many as we can during the program. So without further ado, I'll turn to the councilpersons. Questions are for both of you, unless stated otherwise. So what inspired you to champion the ICE Out legislation? Who wants to go first?
I defer to the minority leader, my minority leader.
Councilwoman Brooks?
Yep. Hi. So thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing. So when we decided to do this legislation, it was right after a series of events that happened here in Philadelphia with unmasked ICE agents or people posing as ICE agents terrorizing communities here in Philadelphia. And our teams realized that we needed to do something. So it actually started off with a series of trainings called ICE Out trainings, where we trained people in the community how to be supportive in any event that ICE showed up at their door, their business, or a workplace. And then from that, we began crafting legislation with our partners across the country through local progress to create this package of legislation that Councilmember Landau and I introduced, I think, in City Council.
Wonderful. So what are the most significant changes made by the legislation and why do they matter?
There's a couple of things. I think also, as in my previous work before coming to council as the director of the Commission on Human Relations in Philadelphia, and knew, just kind of watched what we were in for. So it was so great to have this partnership on council, pushing forth this legislation that we knew immediately, watching what he was doing, like how much worse it was going to be and how vicious he was being immediately. We knew we had to step up and do everything we could do to protect the immigrant communities in Philadelphia. So the core of the legislation is to codify and enhance the city's policies of not cooperating with ICE in all of its federal immigration enforcement activities. It creates a new package of laws, which when they are in full effect, they're going to be codified in the Philadelphia Code that the city can't collaborate with ICE and that ICE can't act in certain ways here. it's hard not to be in the same room with my minority leader. So I'll just keep talking for a minute. You can please jump in whenever you want to give me the cane on either one of you. But basically, I mean, the core of the legislation is ICE. We're prohibiting the city from entering into any cooperation agreements with ICE, like a 287G agreement that would enable local officials to act as an arm of ICE. It prohibits the city from collecting immigration data and sharing it with ICE. It stops ICE from coming into Philadelphia city-owned areas, public property. And it reinforces our non-discrimination provisions so that everybody can have equal access to city services. And then, of course, now I definitely will pass the baton for a very important piece that was definitely, very much championed by Minority Leader Brooks about the no masking and the identifying yourself as an ICE agent. This is something that was very important to the community.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I think I'll elaborate on the no masking piece of it. To the situation that I mentioned earlier, we had decided that, or the community had decided that masking was a major issue. So actually we had the opportunity to, like I said, work with our national partners at Local Progress, and they connected us actually to the National Fraternal Order of Police to help us walk through our the current rulings or the current rules around masking for the city of Philadelphia, police officers in general, and the best practices as been defined in other regions that have passed masking legislation. So it was an interesting partnership. Like when I tell people that we partner with the FOP to decide this, they actually had the strongest language that we could agree upon of any other union that was out there around this particular piece of legislation. And this is what happens when you work in community with folks. Even when you disagree, we're able to come up with solid legislation that supports and protects communities.
That's great. And, I want to just follow up on that one point. You know, I I guess I wanted to ask, was FOP did they have their own concerns about the masking? I mean, is that why they were willing to work with you?
Well, there are other regions, the masking portion had been overturned or had other rulings. So they wanted to, if we're going to enter into this conversation, let's enter into it with good faith. And I think my team worked really well with the national FOP attorneys to come up with the language around this particular portion of the bill.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I assumed, and this is where you should correct me if my assumption is wrong, that one of the reasons they were willing to help is because they themselves were really concerned about these masked people running around their cities. I mean, it's got to be difficult for local law enforcement who are trying to keep everybody safe, and then you have these people with masks and no IDs just picking people up off the street. I mean, I think that's very unnerving for a local law enforcement person who's trying to, again, keep everyone safe. So I assume that's where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. I think overarchingly, you know, they want to move in good faith in community, and with ICE agents acting as not good neighbors,
right,
it wasn't a good look for the police and for law enforcement as a whole. And I think that's
right.
why they were really willing to engage into this conversation, as you suggested.
That's great.
And
So
also,
this,
Kathy, if I
oh,
could
sorry, go
jump in
ahead.
real quick,
Yeah.
I've worked with Commissioner Bethel since he was a deputy commissioner on a variety of complicated community conflicts. And what I had learned from him for so many years is the importance of building some sort of trust and relationship with the community, which is why he told me Philadelphia police don't wear masks. they do have their IDs. This is how they act, and they know that that is the way that they have been able to foster better community relations. So yes, this running around like vigilantes, picking people up, not IDing yourself. And then, to be honest, most people on the street don't know the difference between Philadelphia police, state police, ICE, SEPTA, whatever. They just know it's the cops, right? And this is not good for the cops, and they knew that. So, I think that this was a very, very good piece. And as Councilmember Brooks said, extremely important for the community. That was like their top number one.
That's great. Thank you so much. So there's a question in the Q&A that is a little bit in the weeds, but I think worth it if one of you are able to answer it offhand. And if you're not, that's okay. We could look up the legislation after the program and send it around. But what was the final language that was included regarding the demasking of ICE? And to further elaborate, I think what's meant is, so we have this legislation, let's say a federal law enforcement person walks down the streets with a mask on. What does it mean? I mean, can the Philadelphia police officer stop that person and say, what are you doing?
I don't want to misrepresent the final language in the bill.
I think, in my opinion, technically, yes. And then there's this question about who's going to do it then. I've been poking around a lot on the who's going to do this. The sheriff can make an arrest. The DA's office has 2 detectives on staff. They can make arrests. And our DA has said that he will prosecute anybody who violates the law, including ICE agents.
Okay.
And Glenn, if I misrepresented any of that, you could, okay, thank you.
A brief note for our audience, Glenn Foster is the Director of Legislative Advocacy for Councilwoman Brooks. And so I assume you had a hand in the language. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. And that's yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay. There's another question about efforts to involve people with disabilities who are concerned about ICE. And I don't know if the councilwomen want to comment on that, or if you had any discussion about how this impacts people with disabilities. And I assume the listener was thinking specifically about people who might be blind or deaf. And so they get approached and it's like they don't really know what's happening.
That's a really great question. Our trainings are open to anyone that wants to utilize it. I don't think we've had anyone approach us from the blind or hearing impaired community, but I'm certain that we would be willing to modify the training, so everyone is included. But I don't think we have had that situation happen as of yet. But our trainings are open to anyone who wants to attend. And we have good relationships also within that community. I'm pretty sure we could find somebody to do some adaptations to make it friendly for everyone.
I actually think that question underscores one of the biggest problems of ICE running around and doing anything they want whenever they want to do it. I know that the Philadelphia Police Department has been trained on what to do when you approach a deaf person, what to do when you approach a blind person. I don't know how often this happens, but I remember one of the most impactful community meetings I ever had, went to was with the, what was then the Police Advisory Commission, bringing together the deaf community and the police. And it was hours and hours of testimony and the police responding to it of just like, okay, you're right, we have to re-up our trainings here. But they understood that there is a fully different experience when law enforcement comes to somebody. We had mothers testifying saying, you came into my house, you handcuffed my son, and that's how he speaks to me. That's how he speaks to
Mm.
anybody. And you just came in and
Mhm.
handcuffed and didn't tell me why. So it's like the difference between how we could actually talk to local law enforcement and how you can't talk to ICE, and they probably have never been trained on these kinds of things, is very, very scary.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it also raises the issue about de-escalation because disabilities, as we know, is a wide spectrum. And so there might be somebody who is autistic or who's suffering from extreme anxiety. And, with ICE having no training about dealing with individuals like human beings, it's very concerning. But it's why this legislation is so critically important because it kind of says loud and clear that look, as a community, we want all of our community members to be safe, right? Um, okay, so then that is a good segue to my next question, which is how did community advocates and immigrant residents help shape the final package?
They actually had been involved from the beginning. I think one of the things about how our office moved is that, you know, any piece of legislation that we move through council, we work directly with the activists, organizers, and advocates to make sure that what we're presenting is actually what they're asking for. And they're also involved when it's time to kind of negotiate, the final outcome of the package. So they were a part of this from the onset. This is just how we move legislation in my particular office.
Great.
Me too. I held a hearing in the very beginning to talk about our preparedness as a city, with ICE and any what we were doing to protect our immigrant communities. So we worked with you, Kathy, HIAS, obviously PIC, Pennsylvania Immigrant Coalition, National Youth Services Center, AAU, and so many more, towards getting to this point of and Juntos and so many other groups, of making sure that this legislation had all of their voices in it from the beginning.
That's great. Um, so someone asked, what practical impact would this legislation have on immigrants in Philadelphia? And I'll help to kind of unpack that a little bit. So as you well know, immigrants are extremely afraid because of everything that's going on. And so the fear goes from going to the grocery store to going to court to, going to work. Does this legislation help with respect to those fears? Is there something an immigrant can do if they're on their way to work and are encountered by ICE officials? Yeah.
I think that's where the trainings came in. I think some of the preparedness part couples with the legislation is what we hear from folks in community to make them feel safe. So, like, what to do if you're at work or home, if ICE comes to your door, do not let them in. It's so many different steps that were part of the trainings that we initiated first in preparation for the legislation. So I think the safety portion came in with folks knowing what to do, and the follow up is the laws that are in place to protect when things go wrong. I think one of the arguments that we had against that, people said that it hasn't happened here in Philadelphia. And
Mm.
our response was, yet. We're not going to wait till something happens to set the legislation. Let's put the legislation in place, offer the trainings to prevent harm or undue harm being put on communities. And I think folks were open and welcoming to that. And like I said, people reported that they feel much safer now after the trainings, and coupled with the legislation that will be taking, I think it starts July 7th. I think it's official.
So I think, just to add to that, so the two different types of trainings. One were, what happens if ICE comes to you, and then the second one is for community members to stand up. These were led by Councilmember Brooks's office of making sure that community members also can take part in this, how to be a good bystander, how to make sure that when you witness, how do you document that and stuff. That's all helpful. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people say, well, if I'm undocumented and ICE comes and gets me, what can I do there? That is a complicated situation, and there might not be anything we can do about that specific moment. But I would say, honestly, with these trainings and the fact that Philly got together with such a huge majority of city council, even getting the mayor's signature on this, and we all got behind this legislation to just say, this is how Philadelphia wants to protect our community. This is we drew a line in the sand, and we basically said we are going to do everything that we possibly can to protect the community. And I think just that message in and of itself does a lot. Some people worried the second we would pass this, the floodgates would open, they would come. They haven't come in those wide droves yet, but we are sending the message that this is not happening here, and we are going to take care of our neighbors. And this is absolutely who Philly is and what we stand for. I think it says a lot, and the trainings continue, and community groups can sign up and get them. And I really do think that is we're just creating a network around the city. It's be fantastic.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, what both of you said, I think really strikes a nerve, and completely agree. I also, I mean, as you guys both well know, I mean, the it hasn't happened here. I mean, actually, it is happening here. Our clients are getting detained in droves. What's not happening, thank goodness, is the surge that we saw in Minnesota. And we obviously hope that never happens, although I have my concerns about July 4th. So, but now we have this legislation in place, so we're better prepared to deal with that should that happen. I think one of the things that both of you said also struck me in terms of, you mentioned, Rue, if you're undocumented, we can't necessarily stop that, but it does make the community safer. And so have you anticipated federal lawsuits about the law? And if so, what are your feelings about that?
Feel that the final piece of legislation it passed, we were able to move it forward because other areas have already been challenged. I think our legislation is strong because the folks that came before us, whether it was Minnesota, California, and a few other places, were in concert with us in creating this legislation to prevent the challenges and the lawsuits later on, based on what they went through prior. That's why it was so important for us to work with national organizations like Local Progress to move this legislation forward. So I mean, anything can happen, but I think we're in a good place to prevent some of that.
I would just want to add, there's jurisdictions around the country who have asked us for our legislation now and are copying it. And I think that is so exciting. It's true, things were changing weekly. You get a decision out in California, a decision here, but we wrote this with a lot of national legal input to make sure it could withstand as much scrutiny as possible. So feel good about it. And what I'm saying? Bring it at this point. We did it's a great package of legislation. I feel awesome.
That's great. That's great. So I want to go a little bit further because of the law that just passed with yet another infusion of billions of dollars for ICE. And one of the national orgs that we work with closely has kind of published an analysis of what this new infusion means. And unsurprisingly, one of the points that they make is that this infusion is now being used to provide thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to local police force who agree to cooperate, that's that 287G, which we talked about in the beginning of this program. It's a provision of the law that allows local law enforcement to quote unquote cooperate with ICE, and then it's defined in myriad different ways. In the past, while that provision has been out there, one of the reasons that local law enforcement were uninterested is because they had to bear all the costs. Now, with all this money, our tax dollars at work, ICE is offering to pay local law enforcement, buckets of money, a shameful amount of money. Have you guys spoken with the Philadelphia Police Department, with Bethel? Because the temptation is huge. I mean, police departments are, underfunded. I'm not saying Philadelphia's is, but, it's a general kind of rule. There's never enough money. And so, to your knowledge, are they standing firm? Is there a risk? And what does that mean with the ICE out legislation if Philadelphia police were to suddenly decide to cooperate? What would that mean?
From my experience with the police department and the conversations that I had with them before, we had a couple of meetings where we pulled immigrant community groups and leaders like yourself in with Commissioner Bethel. They have absolutely no interest in doing this. And this, again, goes back to my conversations when our commissioner was a deputy commissioner, is that it is hard enough to do law enforcement in the city of Philadelphia as it is. We have violent crimes. We are trying to solve crimes. They're still, working on building trust. There is all of that there. They don't have any interest in being an arm of ICE, of law enforcement, even with
Right.
even with a bucket of money.
Even with a bucket of money, right? Okay, good to know. Good to know. All right, this next question is a good one, but also goes a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's worth it. So the listener asked about ICE legislation reinforcing our expectation that ICE agents produce a judicial warrant rather than quote unquote ICE detainers. And before you answer that, just to explain, most law enforcement, before they can arrest anyone, unless they have probable cause of something immediately happening, have to go to a judge and present evidence that this person is a problem and I want permission to be able to detain them. ICE has over and over and over again ignored that requirement, which is a Fourth Amendment requirement of the Constitution, and said, oh, sure, we have this ICE detainer, which an ICE detainer is something they made up out of whole cloth. It's a piece of paper that they sign that say, look, I'm giving myself permission to detain this person, which is ridiculous. So can you talk a little bit about how the legislation that you guys wrote and passed, how that deals with that?
So with our legislation, it enforces the law that says that they have to show a judicial warrant when they try to detain someone. That's the purpose of the legislation, to make sure it's enriched. And then also we reinforce that as part of the training for folks to understand and know what a judicial warrant is at the door.
That's great. That's really great.
And they need to stop breaking the law. I mean, one of the saddest things to me is what this has done to the entire court system, right? We have people being held in detention who are being detained who shouldn't be there. And we have so many people there that it is, by the time you go through a process of getting in front of a judge, it's just, the backlog is so tremendous that, when to talk about Fourth Amendment violations, like we're just holding people for absolutely no reasons, is exact opposite of what we've been doing here in Philadelphia. And I think the pandemic really pushed us through this. It's like, why are we holding all of these people in jail awaiting their trial? We've been saying this for years. You shouldn't do this unless there's somebody very violent. Let's let them out and they'll come to their court hearing, right? There's a lot of community reasons to do this. There's personal reasons for, of recidivism and whatnot, that this is like, let's keep this person as whole. But we're doing the exact opposite. I mean, the trauma that we are doing to individuals and families throughout the country, of breaking them apart, putting them in detention in horrific conditions, and having them wait, a year or so for trial, where they find that ICE did something completely wrong and they should never have been held to begin with, is absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous, as a nightmare all around.
Great. So back to the community trainings. I knew we were going to have this question. I was just waiting for it. So we have lots of people interested, if possible, attending trainings like these. How can people find out about the trainings?
They can go to the website. I think it's iceoutphilly.org. If Glenn is here, he can put it in the chat. If folks can read the chat from the outside, so folks will know how to get signed up.
Great. Okay, so beyond immigrant communities, how will the legislation benefit Philadelphia as a whole?
Well, I think when one person is safe, we all are safe. I think as the city as a whole, making sure that discrimination practices aren't upheld, that helps us all. Making sure that ICE officers are not violating the law, that's helping us all. I think when we ICE out of public spaces, like making sure that people feel safe in parks and playgrounds and recreation centers, or making sure folks are okay with going to doctor's appointments in our courthouses. So I think this piece of legislation is like a human rights legislation, making sure that all people feel safe. And then keep in mind, it was a lot of profiling happening around, like who's to say who's an immigrant or not.
Right.
So I think we're upholding public safety as a whole with this package of legislations. And I think like I said, when one person is safe, we're all safe.
Couldn't agree with her more. Just want to add that it also, I think we've strengthened our communities around Philadelphia, to watch how many people have gotten trained or want to help look out for their neighbors. Philadelphia is stronger now than it was in the beginning of all of this. We're just going to all get stronger and fight back together.
Yeah. I've even heard since it passed here in Philadelphia, there's a proposal on the state level, which is very exciting. I don't know how far it will go. It's not Philadelphia, but even to have it introduced, I think is a big deal and is a tribute to the two of you, like putting this forth and making a lot of noise and saying like, we want our community to be safer. Because I think we would say the same thing for the whole state. That we want our community of Pennsylvania to be safer. So the next question leads to, I think, something that is on all of our minds, elections. Does the legislation do anything to protect immigrants who are qualified to vote, who are citizens, really, who are naturalized and able to vote? What does it do for that?
Well, a lot of our elections are held in public spaces, so ICE out of public spaces is a perfect opportunity. And then coupled with the trainings that if someone comes in, they need a judicial warrant and all those things that are happening, and folks are trained to do the work, it helps protect elections.
Can I just go back? You have me reflecting on something else you just previously said, which was about, the hope that we can get statewide legislation. But that coupled with your 287G comment with the new buckets of money coming out to deputize local law enforcement, I hope that one of the things that this did in Philadelphia is really send a message to localities around the state that they can organize and fight against this. So I just really do hope that this legislation even gives people the hope or the tools, and they can reach out to us and our staff. We would love to organize more people around the state to fight against this, because, you know, there's a connection between giving money for 287G and not wanting people to vote. Is very, very calculated what they're trying to do. And it's for us very important that we uphold our democracy.
Yeah, very well said. And I think related to the next question, a listener asked, oops, sorry, my screen jumped. Since the Philly legislation passed, do you know if there have been surges of ICE enforcement in the collar counties or elsewhere in PA? And I'm aware of surges in Montgomery County and in Pittsburgh. There may be other counties that you're aware of, but I think the real issue isn't the surges, but it's the response, right? Which is what Philly has done, what you two have done, has created a model for these counties to fight back, right? So, so I don't know if you have other comments around that, but.
Montco passed some pretty good legislation, right? They missed a piece or two, which I think we're still working on. But the counties are interested. They just, you know, everybody just needs to be courageous and know they can do it. And it is the will of the people. And if it wasn't the will of the people before they saw the atrocities that happened in Minneapolis, it sure is now.
Yeah. Amen to that. Okay. So one of the other questions were, are there ways in which you wish there were aspects of the package that you wish had gone farther, that you felt for one reason or another couldn't go as far as you wanted?
You want to try that one first, KB, or you want me to?
No, you can go ahead because I'm thinking.
I'm thinking too. This is a tough one. I think the truth is, anytime you're doing legislation, we want it to go much further. You know, this what was passed is not what it looked like when we started. We were really reaching for the moon here, but what was passed wasn't too far off, also, and it is so. I'm happy with it. You know, there certainly could be more. There can always be more that we can do. And I think what will be really important is that we talk about implementation. We don't have the authority to implement. That is on the mayor's administration. And so long as we basically wrote the script, here's the script to the blueprint of how we should respond with any of these interactions, and we just need to make sure that we do it. But there's always more, and we will definitely keep looking, and anytime we need to tweak, we will do that as well.
So that's great. I mean, let's talk about implementation. We talked about the trainings, which are terrific. You mentioned the mayor's administration. It's up to her. You provided the blueprint. So what does it really look like? Is it trainings for the police? Is it trainings for the sheriff's office? What are the steps for implementation if the legislation is followed the way we want it to be followed?
I think just today, I think a training already started with some of the city workers because it's beyond just the police and the sheriff. It's the workers that work in every city building throughout, Philadelphia to be trained. And those trainings are getting ready to start along with the union. I think one of the things we didn't mention that we had the support of ACL, AFL-CIO, and many other unions in moving this legislation forward. So the next step was making sure, the next step in implementation was making sure that the workers were aware of the legislation and trained to be able to accommodate that. And that's beginning to happen now. Beyond police and sheriff, we're talking about every city worker.
That's great. And what challenges do you anticipate? I mean, I think you just kind of mentioned the first one, which is getting the word out, right? I mean, it's a big city. So, uh, so getting the word out. What are some other challenges? And are there ways that advocates like our agency and the advocates that you've been working with, how can we help with those challenges?
I think the more we get the more we get the message out and the word out that this exists, that these trainings exist, and that the trainings are available for workers of the city, the better we are. I think that's the number one thing. And I want to mention a few weeks back we did um, a rally for folks to come to ICE trainings, and we weren't explicit that we were talking about business owners. And then business, like the chamber came and said, "Oh, we didn't realize you were talking about us." So I think that's how we can get the information out so people know that it's happening and also know that it's open to them.
That's great.
Most employees, whether it's the city of Philadelphia or otherwise, want to know what to do if ICE comes to their door. And this rush of these folks wanting this information came to us even long before the legislation was even introduced. They wanted to know what to do. So the trainings, whether it be by the city or by private entities, we've trained lots and lots of restaurant owners. What's a public space? What's a private space? What does it mean when you're in a large place and you only have a counter? Oh, it's private space on the other side of the counter. It's very important for people wanted to know, but they wanted to know when they could say no. That was really the most important thing, is when do I get to tell you can't come in here? When do I have to let you in? Oh, it's only with this very specific document, a judicial warrant for a specific person's name signed from a judge. Thank you. As long as I know that now I feel, we gave out samples, what it would look like. Now I feel more empowered to do this. So I think the employees are so excited, and the two of us and all of our staff who are just incredible working on this. We've been around the city. I have not been to one corner of the city where people have not cheered when we talked about the ICE out work we've been on. Even times when I walked in, I'm like, how's this going to go right now? And I was like, and then I just worked on ICE out with Minority Leader Kendra Brooks, and the whole crowd's going, yeah, okay. I really like, if anybody didn't, there might have been some folks who miscalculated this, but we did not.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally citywide how much people wanted this. And it is everything from tell me what to do when they show up to how do we keep them out of here. And again, huge unifying thing for the city of Philadelphia. I really think we are going to be, we're stronger because of this.
Terrific. Councilwoman Brooks, you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce saying, oh, we didn't know this was about us. Is there a formal collaboration with them, with the Philadelphia Chamber, to kind of get the word out and, all of that? And if not, as a chamber member, is that something I can help with?
No, actually, I just think the way we put the trainings out, they weren't clear that it was specifically for business owners. And I think upon conversation, I think they're going to find ways to get it out to folks that weren't aware that this was happening. Like I said, this actual training started in the neighborhood with bars and restaurants, and it has expanded. But as we began to push the messaging out, that's one of the things that I heard from chamber members, is like, we thought it was just for community, not for specifically for businesses.
Yeah, and as a member of the chamber, I can say I'm sometimes frustrated with their take on things, but yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. There is another question. There were mentions of the district attorney's office, detectives, and the sheriff's office enforcing no masked agents. Will there be any kind of hotline where citizens can call or send video if they see masked agents? I think we've all, particularly after the horrors of Minnesota, we've all been training our people, look, you are allowed to stand politely back, to take video, but you really can't interfere, because we don't want anyone getting hurt. So when they do take the video, when they do participate politely in peaceful protests, where can we send that information, if anywhere?
Great. I'm going to ask Glenn to also put that in the chat, because we do have a number that we can call to get that information out in the event that you run into an ICE agent and you need to do something. So Glenn is still online and he'll put that in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we've gotten a lot of questions about this, and it's an issue near and dear to my heart because I've been working with a coalition. Is there a component of the legislation that addresses access to the judicial system, such as barring ICE from courthouses?
We're not there yet.
No.
Rue, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, we've been working on this, and I knew it was coming. This is definitely the next phase. It's just such a really like we talk about the criminal justice system, right? We're asking witnesses to show up to court, victims to show up to court, defendants to show up to court. And when they get there, they're being detained by ICE, often, not always, obviously, for anybody who's listening. Many people are not detained by ICE, but it is a problem. And it's a problem because there's a publicly accessible website that can tell you when someone's court date is, what courtroom they're in, what time it is. We have been working with the First Judicial District and the Sheriff's Office kind of on and off for a while, and trying to get to a resolution that will, the Sheriff's Office has a policy, and we are trying to get stronger policies, both from the court and the Sheriff's Office. It's a work in progress. It's not going as quickly as we want, but it is definitely, we've been working and we're talking, and we believe that we can get there at some point.
Great. I appreciate that. And I'll step out of my role as moderator for a second to say that I'm part of a bunch of different coalitions across the city that are working on this issue. So, so fingers crossed we make some progress. And as soon as we do, we will let everybody know. Scream it from the rooftops. So a listener asked, will there be access to trainings for local hospitals, schools, and houses of worship? And I don't know, maybe this is answered by the community trainings you already put in the chat, but didn't know if you wanted to add to that. Yes, Glenn is responding yes, nodding yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's more. I also want to say one of the great ways in which they've created this model is a train the trainer model as well, because it's an overwhelming demand, right? So it's very important that we have more people who are going to do it. But I also think when I first started participating in some trainings in the beginning, again, it was from the Welcoming Center and a small business immigration lawyer or a business immigration lawyer who was also trying to tell businesses, we talked mostly to restaurants, about what to do. We have to continue to expand, especially for folks who can pay for lawyers. And especially if they're telling them, they're just telling about the law, we have to keep expanding this because the demand is tremendous. And we want to make sure that we get as many people who can afford it trained as possible. So I would suggest, if there's some people, or even if some of the, lawyers can do this pro bono, it's just really helpful. It takes an octopus or 20 to make this happen.
Yeah, understood. So here's a question that certainly I appreciate, with immigrants being under attack every which way. What are lessons from the campaign that you guys led that could be applied to future immigrant rights efforts?
One I would like to say is make sure we include the allies. I think for us, the trainings that were offered leading up to this, not to know your rights, because those were specific for immigrant communities. The ally trainings, we had such an overwhelming response that it was hard to keep up with capacity. And I don't think going into this, we expected not to support as many people that want to get trained. We had thousands of folks trained throughout the city. And we couldn't keep up with the number of trainings, the capacity. We didn't have the capacity to do them. And then we had to move to the train-the-trainer model because it was super popular. And I don't think that's something that I anticipated or my staff, because early on, the trainings, my staff was actually doing it. And it became quickly more than what we could accommodate. And I
And
think
they have day jobs.
right, exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like they were at every night almost. And I was like, okay, we need to expand this. I think that's something we didn't think about.
I would just want to add that uh, we are well aware of the fact that different audiences are moved or empowered by different information. So what I found is you talk to certain groups and they just want to take care of their neighbors. And you talk to another group and they want to hear the economic impact that immigrants have on Philadelphia. I'm here for all of it. I'll tell you anything you need to hear in order to you to be a part of it, in order for people to join this fight. And so when you were asking about kind of lessons learned, is just that there is a whole package of information out there, and I do think we in Philadelphia have not always done the best job of not only lifting up our immigrant communities, but like telling more stories, telling where people are from, telling where they live, telling what they do. And it was almost a crash course in that right now. And that, to me, is that the silence will not happen again. As I said, I had plenty of experience with this at the PCHR. That's like quiet situations happening in neighborhoods, or even some trauma happening in neighborhoods that nobody else knew about. And I think that we've kind of like pulled back the curtain a lot on that, which I think is a great thing for Philadelphia. If people are really starting to wake up and realize who their neighbors are.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, what both of you shared. And it reminds me, when the war with Iran broke out, I think rightfully people were concerned about the legality and where did this come from, and all kinds of different issues. But my thought was, oh my God, Iranian immigrants are now going to be hunted down. So, and I think that, yeah, I mean, getting the stories, reminding ourselves that one, immigrants clearly are under attack. We know that. We know also that immigrants of color are being targeted. We know that people with accents are being targeted, which is completely meaningless, because lots and lots of American citizens have accents. And we also know that with every crazy move that this federal government makes, like a new population falls under a spotlight. And so I think the constant need for stories and reminders is well taken. So
there's so many times when I was at the overseeing the PCHR that we saw not only the reactions happen in communities throughout Philadelphia, but you would watch international disputes trickle into our neighborhoods as well, right? It's when you would watch a minority population of a country suddenly start being targeted by the majority population from that country. Like there's a lot there. There's a lot of layering there. But between that and the targeting by Americans of this, the blaming, the scapegoating, adding scarlet letters to people, that is extremely dangerous.
Yeah. And I think what you lift up is so critically important. It all revolves around dehumanization. And over and over and over throughout history, not just our history as Americans, but history of the world, that's how every genocide begins, is dehumanization. And I don't mean to be alarmist, but I do think it's one of the reasons why this legislation is so critically important, not just because of the facts, because of what it does, but I think both of you have spoken to this because of the symbolic nature. that it means, we are all humans and we're all worthy of protection and we're all not going to put up with lawlessness. And that is just as important as the actual details. So I appreciate that. Um, okay, and this was the quickest hour ever. So,
Let's do another one more hour.
right, right. Maybe we should tune in. Maybe we should plan for like July 10th, right? And see how the implementation is going. So sadly, we've run out of time. We're so appreciative of both the councilwomen and Glenn. What you have done is amazing, and is really just worthy of celebration, and getting the legislation to the finish line. Um, Thank you for taking this important step towards making our entire community safer. If you were inspired by today's program and want to do more, in addition to visiting the Councilwomen's website, so you can sign up for trainings, and help them in the implementation, you can also come to our website to learn about our volunteer opportunities, including advocacy opportunities. And our website should be in the chat. And of course, you can always donate. We always need money. So thank you so much for tuning in. We're really grateful. And we will be posting this on our website, on our YouTube page. It was recorded. And so that will take probably a couple of weeks before it shows up. But please feel free to share it with those who had to miss. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us. We love
Yeah.
HIAS and we love you. And thank you for being part of this whole journey.